Welcome back, everybody, to the Podecito podcast. I'm your host, Surreal469. I appreciate you coming along on this journey with me through our favorite show, Las Vegas. We are on episode 5 now, Groundhog Summer. This is an interesting episode indeed. Before we get to the episode, a few things have been happening here at the Podecito Ranch, as it were. One of the interesting things that happened is, long story short, I started watching Monk again. And on my Netflix, I went through and just pressed play on where I left off. And it led me to, pretty quickly, the episode where Monk goes to Vegas. Mr. Monk in Vegas, I believe is the title. Guest starring Josh Brolin. It just happened to be that episode. The episode where they used the set of the Montecito as a different casino. They made sure to say the Monticello. And I understand why. Because if the incident that happened in that episode of Monk, a murder, happened at the Montecito, you would have to see Big Ed and you would have to see Danny and Mike. You would have to. They would not be involved. Also, Josh Brolin plays the owner of the casino, so I get why they didn't use the Montecito. However, there is still definite Montecito signage. They changed a couple of them to say Monticello, but a couple of the chips say Montecito, so they didn't get everything. But it's definitely the Montecito, and you recognize it as the Montecito, for sure. Anyway, that's enough of that. Let's get to the episode, Groundhog Summer. This is an intense episode. We're going to get through the rigmarole first. The episode first aired October 20th, 2003. The director of the episode was Michael W. Watkins. Michael W. Watkins has directed a bunch of stuff that you may know him for, including Grey's Anatomy, The Blacklist, Royal Pains, which was a whatever show. Blacklist was a great show. Justified, Body of Proof, In Plain Sight, which was a pretty decent show for basic cable. Criminal Minds, Suspect Behavior. The Rockford Files movie in 2010. Did you know that there was one of those? 5 episodes of Law & Order, Dirty Sexy Money. 4 episodes of Monk. Look at that. An episode of Numbers, Prison Break, The 4400. 1 episode of that miniseries. And 2 episodes of Kojak, believe it or not. As well as 4 episodes of our favorite show, Las Vegas. You know what those 4 episodes are? He directed the pilot. He directed What Happens in Vegas Stays in Vegas. He directed this one, Groundhog Summer, and he directed another classic episode, Luck Be a Lady. When we get to that one, that's going to be great. He also did a Prince William movie, Smallville, NYPD Blue. He, earlier in his career, directed a younger Vanessa Marcil, a.k.a. Sam, in a TV movie called To Love, Honor, and Deceive. Ooh, in 1996. I wonder if you can find that one on YouTube. That sounds cheese-tacular. He also did 2 episodes of Chicago Hope, 6 episodes of Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, which also starred, wouldn't you know it, future owner of the Montecito, Casey, a.k.a. Dean Cain. Under One Roof, which was an underrated show, actually. It was a drama starring James Earl Jones just off the heels of The Lion King. And it's not bad. It's not bad. It's got a nice star-studded black cast that if you know or have seen a bunch of black TV and movies, you know who this cast is. And 6 episodes of Quantum Leap is the first thing he did as far as a director. As far as producing is concerned, he did 87 episodes of The Blacklist. So yeah, he's very entrenched in that world. 12 episodes of Prison Break, 9 episodes of our favorite show, Las Vegas. He did Smallville, 38 episodes of The X-Files, Brooklyn South, and his first producing credit is NYPD Blue for 6 episodes. And I want to bring in another credit of his, cinematography, because that's going to come into play in this episode. He's been a cinematographer for a bunch of stuff. The latest one was in 2007, The Naked Detective, as well as Little Shop of Erotica. Ooh, that's another interesting choice. Desire Video. I'm sensing a pattern. Family Album. Let's see. He was the cinematographer on... Do you remember the Robert Downey Jr. movie, Heart and Souls, where he was a little boy followed by ghosts, and they came back when he was a grown-up? It had Kira Sedgwick, Tom Sizemore, Charles Grodin, Alfre Woodard. That was a great movie. Find that movie. That was a great movie. He was a cinematographer for 60 episodes of Quantum Leap. You cannot tell me you don't know what cinematography is if you do 60 episodes of Quantum Leap. Quantum Leap, an amazing achievement in pretty much all aspects of special effects and storytelling and acting and all aspects of the genre, of the medium for the 90s. And he was one of the key cinematographers for that. He started cinematography career doing looks like a movie with Peter Fonda called Fighting Mad. So he knows his stuff. The writers, Gary Scott Thompson is credited, of course. We also have Matt Peiken. Matt Peiken also has some producer credits. His last one was AO Checkup, which was a short that's completed but hasn't been released as of this recording. Last thing he did that was released, producer-wise, was Monarch. He did 45 episodes of Empire. He produced 24 episodes of NCIS LA. He produced 17 episodes of Knight Rider. Yes, that version of Knight Rider show ran by our very own, the Puppet Master, Gary Scott Thompson, as well as producing 105 episodes of Las Vegas. Again, I think he might know what he's doing in that front. His first producing credit was National Lampoon's Blind Date in 1994, which I'm guessing was a video because I'm pretty sure that never came to theaters. But as a writer, Matt's last credit was 2 episodes of Monarch. He did 14 episodes of Empire. He did 2 episodes of Castle, 3 episodes of NCIS LA, 3 episodes of Knight Rider. That's right. 18 episodes of our favorite show, Las Vegas. So do you want to know what episodes of Las Vegas he wrote? Of course you do. In Season 1, he did Groundhog, Summer, Semper Spy, Hellraisers, and Heartbreakers, and The Big Bang. Season 2, he did Blood is Thicker, Dig Us Away With It. I don't remember that title. When you gotta go, you gotta go. Can You See What I See? Letters, Lawyers, and Loose Cannons. Season 3, he did Double Down, Triple Threat. That's just amazing that he did that. Bold, Beautiful, and Blue, and Here's Mike with the Weather, and Fidelity Security Delivery. Season 4, he did Died in Plain Sight, Wagers of Sin. In Season 5, he did Shrink Wrap, The High Price of Gas, and the finale, the much ballyhooed and controversial finale, 3 Weddings and a Funeral Part 2. His first writing credit was also on National Lampoon's Blind Date video game. His first credit as a writer on an actual movie was of Fox Hunt in 1996, but he also wrote the video game in 1996. Another writing credit for this episode is Michael Burns. Michael Burns has some credits as a producer. Chesapeake Shores is his latest producing credit, 26 episodes of that, as well as Greek, Kyle XY. He produced 46 episodes of our favorite show, Las Vegas. His first producing credit was of Baseball's Dirtiest Tricks, which was a video in 1993. Doesn't it sound like one of those videos? Like Dorf on Golf? Like, yeah, it was one of those videos. He did a couple of those leading up to producing something that you might have heard of, which was The Girl Next Door in 99 and 20 episodes of Queer as Folk. As far as a writer, his last writing credit is, again, Chesapeake Shores. He did 9 episodes of that. He wrote 8 episodes of our favorite show, Las Vegas. The 8 episodes, Groundhog Summer, Semper Spy, Hellraisers, and Heartbreakers, The Big Bang. For Season 1. For Season 2, he directed Catch of the Day, Two of a Kind, Whale of a Time, and Hit Me. And his first writing credit was, again, Baseball's Dirtiest Tricks video, but his first writing credit that was not just a straight-up video was DC in 2000. He wrote 2 episodes of that. That's the crew. Let's get in to the actual episode itself. This, as you know, is a powerful episode. This, as you know, is a tour de force for Ed, but we've already seen Ed really act himself in a tizzy. We have not seen that much range from Molly Sims, but we're going to see that today. As we start this episode, we start with some ass. That'll make it past the censors, right? Sure. We start with a sea of just beautifully toned, well-conditioned, well-taken care of backsides, getting a tan, laying out for Groundhog Summer, and the voiceover from Danny. We're going to still hear some voiceover stuff from him, which is a great intro to the episodes. But the very first thing we hear is a music cue, and this music cue is a very interesting one. We hear Joan Jett's version of Do You Want to Touch Me, parentheses, oh yeah, written by Mike Leander and Gary Glitter. Hey kids, do you know who Gary Glitter is? You shouldn't. If you do, call the police. Gary Glitter was a prolific, we'll just say, client of Chris Hansen. Okay? Do you understand that reference? Do you get what I'm saying? He was convicted So convicted, in fact, that most of his music you really can't hear anymore because he's still alive and he still gets royalties when his music is used in television shows, including Las Vegas, including this version because he wrote it, even though Joan Jett sang it. Now, this caused quite the controversy when it was used in an episode of Glee in 2011. It was sung by guest star Gwyneth Paltrow and other guest stars in season 2 that year, and the performance caused such a controversy in the UK that, if you remember, Glee used to release CDs of the songs, which was a great marketing gimmick. I get it. They sang on the show. You might as well release the CDs. Well, they did, and that caused a controversy in the UK because while we here in the US may not have really gotten that memo all that much, the UK definitely did because he's from the UK. And when they released that CD, they couldn't release that version. The UK version of Glee the Music Volume 5 does not include the song. It does not. Instead, they replaced it with Afternoon Delight by the Starland Vocal Band from that very same episode. Joan Jett's version, the version that we hear here, as well as the aired version, the DVD version, the Peacock version, and the Amazon version, was used in a 2008 television commercial for Hewlett-Packard computers. The commercial was withdrawn when the company learned that Glitter, now a convicted client of Chris Hansen, had written the song. And in 2008, it was reported that Glitter would receive £100,000 in royalties for the commercial. So it's still being used, though. And as much as I talk about the replacement of songs on all the versions of Las Vegas, and why did they do that, and even the production music. Oh, they replaced the production music. I can't believe it. If they were ever going to replace one of the songs on the streaming version, they have the best argument for replacing this one. Now it fits the it's perfect. It fits the motif. It fits the scene. It fits the scene as well as perfectly as any other song does throughout the entirety of the show. But if they wanted to replace one, this would be the one that I would give the least amount of fight if they replace this one. I understand the argument because not only is he a convicted purveyor of Chris Hansen, so pervasive that even once he got out, he did it again. And now he's back in prison as of recording. So, yeah. If you have an argument to replace one song, this is the song. Anyway, we see the young, sexy... Oh, that's a terrible, terrible transition. We see... we see the people sunbathing on the beach, including this one guy with his drink knocked over who's falling asleep. We'll come back to him at a few instances in the episode. But again, this is the perfect song. And Joan Jett's version is great for what we're seeing. What a shame. It's, man. And all the times I've seen this, it never occurred to me. Doing the research into this podcast is what made me find this out and look into this. And then I was like, oh yeah. I remember looking something up a few years ago because Gary Glitter did another song that was like a jock jam that played a lot during sports events. And you stopped hearing it after a while. And I remember looking that particular song up, and the rabbit hole was... Anyway, Danny's talking to us about Groundhog Summer. Vegas is the last stop of the season for sunbathers, vacationers, pool goers, etc., while every other place has their pools close early. Vegas's pools don't close until something along the lines of 6 weeks after Labor Day, so sometime in October. Now, I looked up the term Groundhog Summer for this episode, and I could not find any ties to this term anywhere but referencing this episode. Google, Bing, Brave, Vivaldi, none of their search engines came up with anything other than this episode. I don't know if that's a thing that was made up, if that was a super insider term, so insider that it never made it to the mainstream. But I've never been, I can't, if you can, great, but I can't tie Groundhog Summer to anything but this episode. As we continue, we see a shooter at the craps table, and we see a couple of people that we're going to, or at least one person that we're going to see just a little bit later, but we're just going to see her in about 5 minutes. He shoots the dice off, and this is a great shot of the dice as it rolls through. The reflections look great, and one of the dice pops up into a young lady's cleavage. And it's funny because one of the onlookers looks like a side character from Community. I think Garrett was his name. I can't quite pin him as the same guy, but he looks just like him. Anyway, one of the die rolled through to the lady's cleavage.
It's a 5.
Same dice right now.
But guess what? Guess what you can't do? Guess what? Guess what though? That could never happen anymore. That's not a thing. That's not a thing. That can never happen anymore. The last time I went to Vegas, one of the first things I did was I hit the craps table just because there was an attractive woman there. And I was like, all right, this is some luck, right? So I started rolling the dice. It's doing all right. And I had tried to have the girl blow on the dice. You know what I mean? Like out in the open, like nothing, the dice were fully visible. But because it was post the beer virus, they admonished me for having an attractive lady blow on the dice for luck. So, needless to say, the die coming up onto that lady's cleavage would probably be a problem. It would probably kill the momentum these days in Vegas. This place used to be fun. Anyway, the guy's rolling again, and it looks like he's about to win again. And boy, 6 the hard way. The whole table is celebrating. It's great. And we pan over. This is a good, long panning shot, steady shot. Now, Groundhog Summer also, as Danny let us know, coincided with the sci-fi convention in Vegas, which, sure, maybe there's a sci-fi convention in Vegas. Maybe. I'm sure there is. Like, the conventions go all over the place. The guy is super drunk at the table with the aliens, and Nessa has to call it in. And I believe reverting right back from the last episode where she just gave this performance. I believe that's the last we're going to see of Nessa, which is odd considering the subject of this episode basically being her family, Ed and Delinda. But that's about all we're going to see from Nessa, if I can recall. We might see her a little bit later, but that's about it. Also, a thing of note, at least to me, is that the table that she ejects the guy from is a Let It Ride table. I like the game Let It Ride. My dad taught me how to play it my first time in Vegas, and I liked it. I really caught on to it. Basically what it is you bet 3 times, but you can pull back 2 of your bets. You're invested for at least 1. But you can pull back 2 of your bets depending on how the cards are going. So if you're chicken, you can kind of pull back. If it doesn't look great, you can pull back. You can conceivably win more, but you can play chicken with the dealer a little bit. Now, the problem with Let It Ride is that Let It Ride must be one of the least popular tables or something, or it got pushed out. Because even here in 2003, and I was of age 06? Sure. 06. There weren't a lot of Let It Ride tables, but most casinos had a few. There were like maybe a handful of Let It Ride tables in 05, 06, for the benefit of the feds, 06. When I went last time, a lot of casinos totally just didn't have it. You had to go to some of the local places. There might be one Let It Ride table, but most places didn't have it. There was a big push to bring in Pie Gal. and other games that were more popular in Asian countries to benefit more Asian tourists coming in. And Let It Ride was a casualty. And I really liked that game. So much so that there was this website, I don't know if it still exists, where I actually played Let It Ride, like, not for money, but like to practice Let It Ride. It was a great website. Like, I liked it. I played it a lot, actually. So I liked the game Let It Ride. Unfortunately, it's a casualty of the transformation of Vegas, where most places don't have it. R.I.P. Let It Ride. See, I like Let It Ride, the song and the game, but rest in peace, Let It Ride. Anyway, Danny is called over, and we get to meet one of our guest stars, who may or may not be the VIP guest star. I need you to tell me on Twitter. I need you to tell me on Reddit. I need you to tell me on Facebook. Terry from Tulsa. Let's talk about Terry from Tulsa. This is going to be a short entry, because Terry from Tulsa only has 2 credits. I know. She only has 2 credits. And I couldn't find any traces of this actress anywhere online because her name is too common. Her name is Kim Kearns. Here she's Terry from Tulsa. She has 2 credits. Las Vegas is her first one. She did 1 episode of that as Terry from Tulsa. Dawn of the Dead is her second one. And that's a video. She was Girl on Steve's Boat in 2004. So she did Las Vegas, which aired in October, so they probably shot it that summer, maybe September. And Dawn of the Dead, which was probably out early 2004, so she had those back-to-back credits. And that's it. There's nothing else from Kim Kearns. Another example of something that's strange and weird and is a shame because she's really good here. She fits this mold perfectly as the young girl in Vegas who is with her gaggle of friends, and they're just the bubbly girls just running through Vegas that Vegas used to have. It used to be a lot of these. There used to be a ton of these groups, and it was fantastic, but there's not as much anymore, but this is part of what made that version of Vegas fantastic. Anyway, Danny sees Terry from Tulsa, and her friends, all of them look literally right about 18, which is fine, except for gambling. You cannot gamble in Vegas if you're under 21. You cannot drink in Vegas if you're under 21. Other states, maybe, I think I heard that, like, the Mississippi boats, like, on the Mississippi River, I think their age is 18 straight through for drinking and gambling, but Vegas is 21 straight up. And none of these girls look like they're 21. None of them looked 21 at the time, and none of these girls are 21. And they're so not 21 that Terry from Tulsa took her picture in a bikini at a fake ID shop there in Vegas. Just, come on. And they thought they could get away with it because they're cute girls. Here we have a hard tonal shift as Delinda is calling Danny from the club. And she is already not intoxicated, drugged. Just to get it out of the way, the music is production music. She is almost passing out. She is leaning up against a beam. And then all of a sudden we hear, "Come on, I'll take care of you." Let's go back to my place. Danny is trying to hear something, but he has no idea what he's hearing. And we cut to the credits. Hard tonal shift, isn't it? This is the tone of this episode. There's going to be some fun moments in it, but we got a long way to go before we get back to the fun. Since we're here at the intro, I do want to address something. I had a conversation with one of the fans of the show, with the podcast, and of the show, Las Vegas, and they asked about the credits. Because the conversation was something about Sam and the credits and one of the looks that she gives, and I was like, oh yeah, that's the look that she gives in the credits. But they brought something up that, were they different credits? To that fan, Anthony Knott, hope I'm pronouncing your name right, the answer is yes. They're different title cards depending on how you're watching. If you're watching on the DVD, there are a couple of different credits. If you're watching on Amazon and Peacock, they're the same credits. And probably if you're watching on a rerun on Cozy TV or when it aired on TNT or probably the original airing, they're also different. The differences are Mary's title card is different, Mike's title card is different, Sam's title card is different, and Nessa's title card. Or everybody's title card is different except for James Caan and Josh Duhamel. Let's let the dealer shuffle the deck for a second and we'll be right back.
Okay, I'm your amigo. Okay, I'm your amiga. Let's dance the night away. until our bodies got fever.
You're listening to Bundeswing by 1989 TRE. If you like what you're hearing and you want to hear more, hear it again, or both, just go to Spotify and search 1989 TRE, all one word. That's 1989, the letters TRE.
More drinks, tequila, more memories needed. We're gonna live in the moment, como esta noche para siempre. My life is crazy, just like a movie scene. I've been so many places and seen beautiful things, but my mind is captured by this beautiful queen whose dances got me.
But we go through the title card. Danny's waiting in the hospital, and here comes Big Ed. And he is looking for information. He is in mostly CIA mode, but you can see certain things. Like when he's walking through the hospital, about to go to the room, he sighs, just he's very nervous. He's in he's CIA mode, but he's definitely dad right now. He's definitely father right now. And he's trying to use the only tool that he has at his disposal, which is his expertise, which is his resume, essentially. He kind of is going to bulldoze his way through this whenever he has to, including with the doctor. When he asks the doctor about skin samples, and the doctor says she has to report it to police, and Ed gives, as an actor, James Caan gives one of his great line reads here when he says,
I understand. You tell your chief of staff Ed Delen's taking the skin samples with him.
One of the key emotional scenes here where we start to see a lot of range from Molly Sims, where the veneer of Delinda is gone. She is Daddy's little girl in this moment, and she needs her father's strength, and he knows this. Ed knows this, and you can see that he knows this, but he is so helpless. There are certain things in his eyes that you can see that he's trying to keep the veneer of strength and of comfort and of light tones in his voice. But he feels so helpless in this moment because he didn't protect her. At least not to the extent that he would have wanted to. You know, had he been in surveillance, he probably would have seen it or heard it or chased the guy down or something. But this already happened. She was already attacked and drugged. And you could see the vulnerability on Ed. And I can tell you as a guy, when we're in that situation where someone in our lives is helpless, when something happens to someone close to us and we weren't there, can't do anything about it, it's already happened, we're just finding out, when we're in that mode of instantaneous helplessness, but we still have to convey strength. You can see that written all over James Caan. This is why James Caan was an amazing actor. It's written all over his face. That humanity that you may not understand until you're older. I didn't necessarily understand it until I was older. But even watching this, when I did, I got the emotions. I got some semblance of, while I may not have completely understood the emotions that James was conveying, I understood that he was conveying them. I got it. I got the intensity. And you can see it all over his performance here. Not just in this scene, but all through the episode. It was a quick scene with Molly Sims, but she was very good in that scene. She conveyed a lot in that scene. And it did a lot to, while we understood they were father or daughter, it did a lot to cement further that relationship to the viewer. So Ed goes out to Danny. He tells Danny to check the tape. And
You find that son of a bitch and you bring him to me.
Don't you think we should contact the police?
You find that son of a bitch and you bring him to me.
And Danny, for the first time in this episode, he's going to do this 4 times. And that's 4 times too many for Ed. He suggests bringing the police in. And here's another great James Caan line read. You find that son of a bitch, and you bring him to me. Fantastic. Fantastic. So we cut back. Here's a tonal shift. Again, we cut back to the Montecito parking lot, and Mike opens the cab for some MIT students. The MIT students are listed as Larry, Moe, and Curly because of Ed's reference to them being stooges. They never actually give their names. Thankfully, IMDb does give us some names. Adam Consolo plays quote-unquote Curly. Adam Consolo is the short one with the glasses, so that you know who he is. He's got a couple of credits. His last credit was as a producer. He produced I Am Paul Walker, ironically enough. Why is that ironic? Because Gary Scott Thompson created Fast and the Furious, which is how most people know Paul Walker. As an actor, Las Vegas was his last credit in 2003. His last credit. Before that, he did Cousin Scooter, Shasta McNasty. Ask your parents about Shasta McNasty on UPN. He was on Pros and Cons, which was a movie with Tommy Davidson and Larry Miller that I've never heard of, but now that I know that they were in it, I want to watch it. He was in Life with Louie for 3 episodes as Craig and or Eric. He was uncredited in The Cable Guy. He did Third Rock from the Sun for an episode. Brotherly Love for 2 episodes. That was the Matthew, Joey, and who's the other one? Matthew Lawrence, Joey Lawrence, and who's the Andy Lawrence sitcom in 96. He did 2 episodes of that. He did an episode of Nightstand. Nightstand is one of the funniest things to ever hit television. It's a parody of talk shows from the 90s starring Tim Stack, the guy from Son of the Beach. I discovered this after Shotgun Saturday Night went off at like 1 a.m. or whatever that was back in the 90s. And it was on the same channel, and I thought it was a sleazy talk show, but the crowd isn't in on it. The audience is just laughing along with, like, they're in on it that they know it, or maybe they figure out it's a parody. But it's so good. There's a live audience there as if they were the audience of a talk show. They bring in improv actors. It's great. And a lot of the episodes are on YouTube. I cannot recommend enough. If you don't take anything else from this episode, I cannot recommend, especially after the tone of this episode. If you need a good, long, hard belly laugh, go find the Nightstand episodes with Tim Stack. Initially called Nightstand with Dick Dietrich was the character that Tim Stack played. Dick Dietrich was the host. Anyway, Adam did an episode of Home Improvement, Saved by the New Class. He did an episode of Happy Days in 82, like the waiting years, as Scooter. His first acting credit was in Chips as a victim in a Trick or Treat episode in 1982. That's Adam Consolo, the short guy with the glasses, aka Curly. One thing that I tried to piece this together, but I guess they're not. You know who he looks like? Here's another thing. Not just the short guy with the glasses. He looks a lot like the original Freddy from Frasier. Do you remember? Find the original Frasier. Forget the reboot. Find the original Frasier. The kid who played Frasier's son, Freddy, looks so much like this guy. I was like, they have to be related. They're not, but they look so much alike. It's eerie. All right, let's go to Mo. Zachary Kranzler is his name. He did a few things. This is not his last credit. This is his second to last credit. His last credit was in an episode of Mismatch starring Alicia Silverstone as Scott. He was credited as Zachary W. Kranzler there. He did an episode of that. Also in 2003, then Las Vegas. He was actually on Frasier in 2002 as Todd for an episode. He did Firefly. His first role was on Nash Bridges in 1999 for an episode. Then there's Kelvin Yu, the Asian stooge. He is played by Kelvin Yu. Larry is the name that they gave him. He has some acting credits, of course, but here's his big claim to fame. He's a producer now. You know his big thing that he produces? 215 episodes of Bob's Burgers. Yeah. 215 episodes of Bob's Burgers. He also did Central Park, Bob's Burgers the movie, and his first producing credit was for The Tip, which was a short in 2009. As far as acting is concerned, his last acting credit was as Confucius on Clone High. Look at Clone High making a comeback. He did that for 20 episodes. He did The Great North. He was a voice there for 9 episodes. Wonder Woman 1984 as Jake. He was in Master of None for 6 episodes as Brian. He was in American Dad, which is probably how he got into the animation realm. He did NCIS, he did Common Law, Dallas, the reboot in 2012. And before he did that, he did Torchwood. And just before he did Torchwood, he... Wait a minute, did you hear that? Oh, must be hearing things. Anyway, just before he did Torchwood, he did... There it is again. Did you hear? Oh, that's right. He did the Hawaii Five-0 reboot starring Scotty Conn. Yes, he did. He was in an episode of that. He was in NCIS LA, which is a connected show to Hawaii Five-0. He was in Bones, the Star Trek movie in 2009, CSI New York, Milk, Cloverfield in 2008, Burn Notice, Dirty Sexy Money. Great title. Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. One of my, again, favorite shows. I remember him from that. So on Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, his name, ironically, was Kevin Yu, not Kelvin Yu. He was in 2 episodes. The first 2, I believe, he was one of the writers in the room that Matthew Perry and Bradley Whitford hated, that were in the last regime that he got rid of. That's where I distinctly remember him from. He was in Grandma's Boy Without a Trace. He was in Elizabethtown with Kristen Dunst and Orlando Bloom. He was in The Division in 2004, which is a great show. Then he did Las Vegas, Judging Amy before that. Let's see, The Shield, The Tick in 2001, great show. He was in ER for 1 episode. He was in Frasier as well for 1 episode in 2001. He was in Felicity. And his first acting credit is in 1999 through 2000, 6 episodes of, do you remember the WB show Popular? He was on Popular. He was Freddie Gong on Popular, which, for the most part, Popular really only sticks in my mind because it was like the first big thing that Sarah Rue did. I didn't really watch it, but I remember her from that show, and Sarah Rue's great. So, that's Kelvin Yu, the producer of Bob's Burgers. He's one of the stooges here. Immediately, they have Mike's attention, in part because they're from MIT. And don't you know it, Mike graduated from MIT, and these guys won't let any of the bellboys take their stuff. They're overly protective of it, like they are standoffish about it.
Uh-oh, are you boys here for the Groundhog Summer or the Sci-Fi Convention?
Neither. We're here for the engineering convention.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Which was over last week, and even Danny says, well, maybe they got their dates mixed up, and Mike comes in with the...
I'm from MIT, Danny. Students from MIT don't screw up their dates.
So watch out for them. Yes, let's watch out for them because they are contenders for the VIP guest stars this week, as well as the Montecito Magic. Oh, even in an episode like this, there has to be some Montecito Magic. Anyway, Danny and Mike talk over the events of last night with Delinda and the attacker, as well as the fake IDs that Terry from Tulsa and her girlfriends were passing around. Apparently, Mike says this is the 3rd one this week. Danny then goes in to talk to the manager of Mystique for a quick scene, which to me always stuck out as like a little bit of a weird scene. Like I always felt like he was the actor. He was being done a favor by somebody because we never see him again, ever. Ever. He never comes back for another episode. He never comes back later in this episode. We never see him again. But we do see somebody again as Danny. And here's another thing that's also weird. This whole little pocket here is a little bit odd. Because then you have Danny standing, or Josh Duhamel specifically, standing in front of an obvious green screen of Vegas. They obviously weren't in Vegas when they shot this maybe pickup scene or something. It's an obvious green screen of him on the strip looking around just weirdly outside, and then he sees a traffic light, and then we whoosh through his sunglasses through to a poster in traffic control. I guess, like, was the episode short? Like, did they have to, like, put in maybe a couple of little pickups just to kind of make it 44 minutes or something? I don't know. Like, it was just kind of weird and off and not great with the flow, but that's, like, the only thing. They stick out because of the only things that aren't quite congruent or as well flowed as the rest of the episode. So Danny goes into the office. He sees chain smoker, no. Old lady, not a chance. Beautiful girl, bingo. Let's talk about the beautiful girl. The beautiful girl is played by Paulette Braxton. Seemingly not related to the Braxton family, a.k.a. Tony Braxton. And I guess she's got sisters that people know about. Apparently not related to her. But she's an actress that I know of because I've seen her in a whole bunch of African-American centered TV shows and movies. Her last credit, this is another one where a good actress, and the stuff I've seen her in, she's good. The latest I've seen her in was, as I was looking for contact information for guest stars, I saw on TikTok one of her friends showed a video of her congratulating her for something, and so I saw an updated version of Paula Braxton. Apparently she doesn't have any or much social media. And it's weird because the last thing that she did as an actress, Injustice in 2006. What? The show is called In Space Justice in 2006. She did one episode of that. That's weird because she was on a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know what happened. And I can't find much information. She was a co-worker in a short called Pete in 2005. Before that, she did Love Supreme, which is another short in 2004. She did an episode of CSI Miami. She did an episode of ER. She did Las Vegas. And before that, she did 13 episodes of The Parkers as Veronica Cooper and or Rhinestone. I was never a fan of The Parkers. But if you were, you probably know who she is. She was on there for 13 episodes. She did an episode of Any Day Now. She was in Lockdown with Master P and Richard T. Jones. She did an episode of The Steve Harvey Show. She did an episode of Smart Guy as Jessica Fox. Of course, the name would be Jessica Fox just because, right? She was in A Night in the Roxbury. She was in The House. Do you remember In the House? The LL Cool J sitcom, which originally starred Debbie Allen too, but the LL Cool J sitcom. She was there for 11 episodes. She was Natalie Davis from 97 and 98, which was the waning years of the show too. So those are the seasons where it was LL Cool J, Maya Campbell, Kim Wayans, and Alfonso Ribeira. The last seasons where LL Cool J's character ran a physical rehab center. She was in those episodes, yeah. That's probably where I really recognize her from. She was in the movie called Double Blind. She did an episode of Malcolm and Eddie. She did 21 episodes of Homeboys from Outer Space, which is considered one of the worst shows in television history. And from what I hear, the story, just very quickly, the story of Homeboys from Outer Space is that it was supposed to be good, but then the network got a hold of it, and it turned out to not to be. She was in an episode of Ellen. She did an episode of New York Undercover as Naomi in 1995. Maybe you remember her from that. That might be where I first recognize her from. But she was also, her first acting credit was on A Different World as Ron's date under the name Edna Braxton, which is probably her real name. In 1990, she did one episode of that. So that is Paulette Braxton. Strange. She's good, and she's good in this episode. Danny immediately sees her as this gorgeous woman that's sitting over there. Not quite my type in this episode, just because I prefer longer hair. But the body is great. And Danny is left in amazement when she says,
We shared many shower together.
I think that I would have remembered taking a shower with you.
It's me, Danny. Kyle.
Kyle Jackson from baseball, it's Kitty now. We're going to see one of the connections for Danny being a hometown boy who knows everybody, even though he doesn't know that he knows everybody. At least he didn't know that he knew this girl, who wasn't always a girl. And all the guys around are checking her out, and she's liking all the smiles, and she's smiling back at them and all the looks and everything. And they go over their history where Kyle was supposed to be going to the Yankees, but now he's Kitty, which makes me wonder, even in 2003, this would be a phenomenal, almost otherworldly transformation, because if you're a baseball player, if you're a college baseball player about to go to the Yankees, your body does not look like this. And the transfer, like in terms of muscle mass, in terms of size, in terms of shape, in terms of curves, she would have had to have gotten a ton of, forget hormones, she would have had to have gotten an extraordinarily large amount of work done to get the body of a woman that she has, from the body of an athletic college baseball. So every athlete has different body shapes, right? Football players look different than boxers, look different than basketball players, look different than, right? So baseball players have a very specific type. A ton had to change for her body type to look like this, including I don't know where the muscle went. It's strange. Anyway, not strange, but it would have to be very intricate. Anyway, we cut back to the Montecito, and we see all the aliens from the sci-fi convention, and this is a point where you can kind of tell it's 2003 because of all the employees who are looking like, oh, these strange people are so... Mind you, these people work and live in Vegas, and they're looking at these people who are cosplaying as if they're strange. I mean, really, of all the things that happen in Vegas, but it's a lot different now. Cosplaying is a lot more common. The convention scene is a lot more common. Geek culture is a lot more common. So it's different now. Danny warns Mary about what's been going on. We hear one of the security guys talking about the guy who's been asleep on the lounge, who I wanted to make a VIP guest star, but on the poll options that I have on social media, they really only give you 4, so I couldn't. But he might be a candidate for Montecito Magic as well, because we'll catch that later. Anyway, Ed and Danny are going over the footage in the club scene, and we zoom in. Again, the technology is amazing that we get to zoom in this clearly, even on the pills that are being dropped into the drink in 2003. And just the pills just happen to luckily fall into the drink where you could see the label on the pill. We'll let that pass, but the technology was nowhere near that clear back then, and that's why they had to enhance it here for the show. We get a quick glimpse of what the pill is. It's roofies. There's been a lot of talk about roofies even recently. The footage we see is of what we saw earlier, where Delinda is falling against the pillar. And Ed, again, you can see a bit of the helplessness as he is watching probably the hardest thing he will ever have to watch, and that includes a lot with his history. But we can't get a clear shot of the guy's face because the cameras aren't positioned in a place where we could see the guy's face with where he's standing and how he's standing. Maybe he saw where the cameras were, etc., and worked accordingly. But Ed blows a gasket and wants Danny to go in there and replace them. Then he sends everyone away as we get the traffic cam footage from Kitty. In the traffic cam footage, we see the Predator leading Delinda away in his car, but she gets out. And we get to see the plate. That's reasonable. And we, as a zoom in, we will swipe that away, and we see Delinda trying to get out. And the Predator is trying to chase her, and Delinda is fighting back. Back elbow. Mule kick off the trunk of the car. And now Ed is proud of her for all the fighting that she knows how to do, and swinging away. And she knocks him down. She gives him black eyes. She hits him a couple of times, and we see a side view, a slight bit of a back profile of the Predator. And Ed is seething when he says,
I'm gonna kill that son of a bitch.
And we zoom in through to another shot where we get to see the Predator outside by the pool.
Why don't you take a little break?
Yeah, that's a good idea. You're gonna stretch the legs, wash the face, refocus.
There you go.
I assume you're interested in large amounts of money.
It's Vegas, who isn't?
If you like the podcast and you want to help support it, you can send a Cash App, join our Patreon or Subscribe Star, or buy us a coffee. Just search The Podecito on all those platforms. Now, if you're like me, The Predator looks awful familiar, doesn't he? And if you're like me, the first time you saw this, you said the same thing I did. Aw, Mr. Turner, no! Yes, it's Mr. Turner. His name is Anthony Tyler Quinn, by the way. His last known credit, according to IMDb, is The Man from Nowhere in 2021. He also did a short, Day 37. He came back for 3 episodes of Girl Meets World, which I choose not to think about because they butchered that idea, which I had. I was going to write it. Like, I had the idea in my head, I had characters in my head, and my homeboy told me that they were coming back with it, and that they were putting it on Disney Channel as opposed to ABC, and I knew it was ruined as soon as I heard that. But we won't get into that. That's another tangent. He did an episode of Henry Danger. Your kids might know what that is. He did an episode of NCIS in 2014. He did 9 episodes of Days of Our Lives in 2013. He was in Pretty Little Liars in 2012. He was in American Bandits, Frank and Jesse James, which was a video in 2010. He was in an episode of House in 2010. I remember him in that episode. He was pretty good in that. He was in A Christmas Snow in 2009. He was in an episode of The Mentalist, an episode of Ghost Whisperer, starring Jennifer Love Hewitt, who on Boy Meets World was dating, not just on Boy Meets World in real life, was dating Boy Meets World co-star, and apparently really good friend of Anthony Tyler Quinn, Will Friedle. Yeah, look at that connection there. He was in an episode of Cold Case. He was in an episode of Dexter. I remember him in that. He was in an episode of Passions, which is interesting because Passions is directly related to Las Vegas. Mary does a cameo in an episode of Passions where they do something in a casino. They just have a casino set. It's not really the Montecito, but there was an episode where they're in the Montecito, and they say it's in the Montecito, and Mary's in there. He does this episode of Las Vegas 2 years before that episode of Passions. He was in Dead Last, which was a pilot in 2001, Diagnosis Murder in 2001, Normal Ohio in 2000, Just Shoot Me in 2000. 5 episodes of Caroline in the City as Randy Thorson, an episode of Third Rock from the Sun, an episode of Party of 5 for 2 episodes as Sean Sullivan. And he left Boy Meets World, or was exited from Boy Meets World or something. It was around the same time to go do Ask Harriet, which was so awful. It cannot quite be expressed in words. Where he played a struggling writer. It was the TV version of Tootsie, where he played a struggling writer who couldn't get on a newspaper team, and so in order to do it, he makes this column called Ask Harriet, with this advice column, which is fine. That happens a lot. And a lot of the time, or at least it did, and a lot of the times those advice columnists, they weren't the person that they were pretending to be. Like somebody said they were a doctor or something, they wouldn't have been a doctor. Or there were a couple that claimed to be like an old aunt or a mom or Mrs. something, and they weren't. Like they might have been a guy. Like that wasn't an uncommon thing that we later found out about. But for some reason, as of the premise of this show, he had to pretend to be a woman even in the office, so he dressed up in this terrible drag outfit that didn't fool anybody and couldn't fool anybody because of his body frame. We're talking about body frames again. And shenanigans ensued, and they were all awful. Even 13-year-old me was like, this is bad. This is just bad. And I watched it. I watched it because I wanted to support Mr. Turner. I wanted to like it. I like Anthony Tyler Quinn. I wanted to follow his career, and I wanted it to be good. And I was like, all right, if he's leaving Boy Meets World, hopefully this is something good, and he can star in it. It's a starring vehicle for him. It was terrible. It was diddly awful. Oh. He was in Jag for an episode. He was in Melrose Place for 6 episodes as Lieutenant Tim Truman. In 94, around the same time, he got Boy Meets World for 51 episodes as Mr. Jonathan Turner, where most people know him from. He's Mr. Turner. He's Mr. Turner to basically everybody. He did an episode of Sliders. He did a show called, and here's another interesting thing, he did a show with Patricia Heaton, himself as one of the stars, and Nikki Cox. That's right. In 1994, he did 5 episodes of a show called Someone Like Me as Steven Stepjack. That also starred Nikki Cox. It must not have gone anywhere. I'd never heard of it at all. I don't even know where it would have appeared, but there you go. He has a connection with Nikki Cox. He was in Down the Shore, which was it was an alright show. Like, the premise was fine. They didn't know what they were doing with the characters, but you can find episodes on YouTube. And some of the actors on there, including a younger version of, I think her name was Skylar, the wife from Breaking Bad. Okay, show. He also had a starring role in Working Girl as Sal. That was a show that starred Sandra Bullock in the titular role in 1990. He did 12 episodes of Pascarella. Never heard of that. He did an episode of Family Ties. He worked on Peyton Place, the TV movie, in 1985. He was an Airwolf for 3 episodes as Everett. And his first credit in 1982 was on Angel as Maloney, and he was credited as Tony Quinn. That's Anthony Tyler Quinn, a.k.a. the Predator. Oh, Mr. Turner, no. We see him by the pool, and he's got both black eyes. Now, at this point, between this transition and the next scene transition, where the Predator, he's always going to be Mr. Turner to me, but not in this role. He can't be Mr. Turner. He's got to be the Predator here, even though if I ever see him, he's definitely Mr. Turner. Is some kind of saxophone song. I can't find it anywhere. It must be a production song, but it plays on all versions of the show. And he spots Sam, which is an amazing sight because he does, from his vantage point, his POV as he's walking up, he sees nothing but the chair until he walks over there. And then we see Sam by the pool reading Satin Seas, which is just a terrible looking trashy book, and good for her for reading a trashy book, because why not? Well, she's on a break. And we cut back after that through a commercial break, and we hear a couple of different songs, depending on the version. We have a musical break here. If you're watching on Peacock, you hear a song called Soul Man by Greg Hatwell. If you're watching on every other version, I can't tell you what song. It must be a production song. I can't tell you what it is. But on every other version, it's Soul Man. And boy, do we see all the bodies everywhere and the sci-fi geeks checking everybody out and everything. And it's a happening, man. And it's setting the scene, but it doesn't tell you the whole story off of this commercial break. So if you're just coming back, you really don't get what we're talking about here. We do see the suntan guy again. He's, I believe, credited as Lone Guy, and we'll get to him a little bit later. Some kids are pouring sand into his drink. Sam is not impressed with Mr. Turner at all, and I think one of the things that, and they could have maybe conveyed this a little bit better, after the Predator checks Sam out, right, he opens his hand and has the pills there, which is bold. He's planning on doing this in broad daylight in a sea full of people where the exit routes are definitely covered by a ton of people. He doesn't know who Sam is. But he's planning on doing this with a ton of people. The only connection of why I think he would possibly do this is because Sam's water is open. There's no top on it, and that makes it probably an easier target for him, obviously, than one that is covered. But he doesn't see that as he's walking up to her. Anyway, Sam is not impressed. He says, maybe we'll hook up later.
Not later.
At this point, he has already put the pills in her water, and we whoosh to it. And we see the pills dissolving. That's a good effect for 2003, actually. And Sam tosses the bottle, and his mission is burnt at that point. Ed is up in surveillance, and they're looking through all the pictures and the black book. And Danny is a little bit more on the ball this episode than he was in the last episode. He's trying to think like, he's not trying to think like the Predator. He's still thinking like himself. So he's saying stuff like, how is the guy would have been gone by now? Why are we still looking for him? He'd be gone by now. I know I would. And he brings the cops up. He mentions the cops one more time. That's strike 2. We see the MIT Stooges in the Bellicera. And that reminds Danny to get a maid up to their room and check on them because of the tip from Mike. So we bring them back around. This is where the surveillance room really comes into play. as we get to dip in and out of a couple of different stories at the same time. So now we see the teamwork between Ed and Danny as they're trying to talk about things that the Predator could have to use because he's got the black eyes from Delinda, including sunglasses. And that's the first key that they're going through. Meanwhile, the maid goes into the geek's room, and she gives one of the great lines of the show as well, especially this early.
They are pigs.
It's a great line. It's great read. Great, fantastic. And this is where we start to bring Mike into the scene, as Ed wants to find somebody who can tell them what the Stooges have in their room, and Danny says Mike can, and that says that's great. So they follow up on the sunglasses thing, where the guy has to wear sunglasses everywhere, even though Danny says that everybody's wearing sunglasses. And then Ed suggests that Danny goes to check on Delinda in the club, and it's a weird exchange. Like, I think maybe because Danny's feeling some kind of way because they're no longer together, but they're still friends, they're co-workers. It's still an important thing. It's still something that happened on Montecito ground to someone that he's close to. Yeah, go check on her, Danny. Before that, he goes down to the valet area and he talks to Mike to send him up to surveillance. So here at the valet, Danny tells Mary,
Hey, I need you to talk to all your old friends. I'm looking for anybody wearing sunglasses at night.
That's just a weird line to me. I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if they're still trying to tie up the loose end of Mary used to be a prostitute, but they canceled that by the time the pilot aired and the Predator struck in a club. So does he mean all her old friends that used to go clubbing? Mary goes clubbing. We've seen Mary in a club in a couple of different episodes. I think she's more running the event, but why wouldn't she necessarily go to a club at any point? It doesn't, that line, tell all your old friends, doesn't make sense to me. I don't know if that was supposed to lead somewhere or not. I'm not sure. So Danny goes to check on Delinda in the club, and here's a musical note. We hear a song called For a Day by Scott Bennett and the Dotted Line. That's on the DVD version, that's on the Peacock version, that's on all the versions. That maybe the aired version as well, but that's on. I didn't have a chance to get straight from the airwaves version this episode, unfortunately, but the DVD version, Peacock and Amazon, all the same. And they talk in the club, and they hug, and Delinda is carrying on. Delinda is being a soldier, and Danny is fronting like he's really there to put in the cameras, which he is, but he's clearly there to check on Delinda. Delinda knows it, and Delinda says she wants to see the footage. Danny tells her you're not going to be able to ID the guy, but Delinda gives another great performance here in this scene, where she tells Danny,
Everybody asks me if I'm okay. And I say yes, because I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me. But the truth is, I can't remember anything.
You kicked the crap out of that guy. It was unbelievable.
That's what I heard.
You were awesome.
And you see a couple different emotions on her face, like that brings a smile to her face, but it's a bittersweet smile. Like, yeah, she had to use her self-defense. She got to use her self-defense skills, but she had to use them. She was in a situation where she had to use them. That's not a good thing. That's not something that you want to be in. And she's dealing with the aftermath of that. And she's trying to be strong about it. And not even necessarily being strong, but she's just carrying on with it. And you see that she's very good here. She's very down to earth here in this particular scene. And it ends with a line as a D&D shipper. I have to acknowledge the D&D shippers, because they used to love this line and they used to love this scene. I have to acknowledge this line because it is a fair line to use if you're a D&D shipper. She says,
Okay. You know, that night, I do remember one thing. When I was in trouble, I called you.
it's a fair line. That's a fair line. And the look that she gives Danny, that's fair. That's fair. I cannot deny that. Now, does that change my feeling about Danny and Delinda versus Danny and Mary? No. But I'll give you, that's a fair point. That's a great point. That's a great point. D&D shippers, one in your column. There you go. You never thought you'd see the day, did you? No, of course not. But I'm full of surprises here at the Podecito. Anyway, Danny goes down a hall, and he runs into Mike, who's coming back down from surveillance. And they talk about the MIT geeks and what they have. Now, they must not have had access to much of... They might still be in Mandalay Bay at this point of shooting for a lot of stuff. They must not have had much access to a lot of these hallways because Mike and Danny go through, they pace the same area. This always struck me. They go back and forth 3 times together. Danny goes by 4 because Mike leaves on the 3rd one. They pace back and forth down the same probably 10 yards of hallway 3 times. But Mike talks about the MIT boys and what they have and believes that what the damage they could do is probably a whole lot. Then Danny gets a call from security guy saying that there's a guy going into the club with sunglasses and sending up pictures right now to surveillance. Now, Ed doesn't get a hit on this guy because he doesn't look like the guy. There's no match. And I don't think there would be a match. Now, I think they're trying to convey that there's no match because of the limits to the Montecito technology at this point. But this particular picture never looked like the original Predator. This particular picture never looked like Mr. Turner. It looked like a double. You know who it actually looked like? It looked like Will from Will and Grace to me. It always looked like Will from Will and Grace to me. So it never struck me that they were the same. Danny goes back downstairs and is teased by Sam about...
Listen, I didn't know that you and Kitty from Traffic Control were a thing. What? Former Kyle Jackson minus the Johnson.
It's great. That's a peak. That's one of the early peak Sam lines. It's great. You really get a lot of her personality out of that. She's trying to make light of the situation, and they talk about just light in general. And they talk about Delinda briefly. She asks if she's okay. They talk about Groundhog Summer, and then Sam talks about the Predator meeting her down by the pool with the 2 black eyes. And Danny sends her up to surveillance because it's probably Mr. Turner, and it is the Predator, not Mr. Turner. I gotta stop doing that. It's definitely the Predator. Before she goes up to surveillance, though, we run into Terry from Tulsa again. Well, Terry from Tulsa runs into Sam and Danny specifically, and she invites Danny to a rave. So Sam is teasing Terry from Tulsa and her girlfriends about the rave until Terry snipes back with, whatever, all the hot girls are going to be there, including... And then Sam feels a little bit like, ouch. But Danny says a rave, that's a perfect place for a Predator like this. And we go to the rave, very small soundstage area, actually, if you're looking at this. But we see Ed get out of the truck with Delinda, Mike, and Danny. So they got a whole gaggle of people here. And Ed tells Delinda that he just needs her to ID the guy. An ID that it's the same guy. Ed shows out a little bit because the bouncer tries to hold him back because he's a little bit older, but then there's the Predator near the head of the line, and he looks back in a devious way, tips his glasses down, smirks, and then goes in. As, like, at that point, like, sure, that's a great escape plan, and he would probably leave somewhere through there if he could. But then we go in, and we hear Danny and Mike talk about how it's a beach party, everyone's wearing sunglasses, so they lose the guy. They lose him in the club. And I believe the Predator probably left. As we come out of that scene, we go back to the pool where the lone guy is still sitting there sunbathing. And some girls are putting sunglasses on him. He's still asleep. And we see the Predator back out by the pool again in the same shirt he was in the day before Like, if you're on vacation, that happens. You sometimes wear the same clothes a couple days in a row. Depending on the circumstances, it's not unheard of. So Danny comes up, and he's got the nail samples from the CIA. And he mentions the CIA, and this is the next time that it gets shut down as soon as he says CIA. Because Ed just gives him a glare.
The DNA results from the skin under Delinda's fingernails. You know, it takes 3 weeks for Metro to get those results. How did you get the CIA to...
Danny mentions the cops again. That's the third time. That's the third strike. And Ed has to tell him again to check all the ways out of town and have them covered. And again, Danny is again slightly thinking like himself, like I would have left a long time ago. And Ed gives a little bit more insight on his take of Danny and Delinda's relationship. And basically, he's really trying to tell what he really is doing. Is he's telling Danny, you're thinking like yourself, but you're not him. I never would have thought that you would hurt Delinda or any other woman. This guy enjoys doing it. Basically telling him, stop thinking like Danny and start thinking like this guy so we can catch this guy. And Danny is finally starting to get it a little bit. And as he's starting to get it, we start to see the patterns that's going through here because his DNA pops up through the other stops, through the other vacation stops of Groundhog Summer. And here Danny says, that's it, I'm calling the cops. And this is one of the other great line reads from James Caan when he tells Danny,
Listen, if you mention it again, once more, I'm going to pull your tongue out and mail it to your father. Once more!
Great. Fantastic line read. Fantastic line read. And it snaps Danny back into line in thinking of how to catch this guy. So Danny comes up with the idea that sunglasses are one thing, but what about alien makeup with the sci-fi convention? Now things are starting to tie together. With the sci-fi convention, he has all these different forms of elaborate makeups and masks to shield himself, to shield his identity, if he's still in town. And according to this story, he's still in town. Hold on a second. Let's get a new deck in here, and we'll be right back. For the freshest and in-depth reactions and analysis of all the goings-on in hip-hop, sports, poetry, and everything else, go to Poetics Reacts on YouTube. Hosted by world-famous poet and chef Mr. Poetic, Poetics Reacts gives you points of view you never thought of and never thought of saying out loud. Go to YouTube and search Poetics Reacts or tinyurl.com/Poetics Reacts now. That's POETIXREACTS. Sam sends some sci-fi guys away to a couple of different things, and she says this line here, 2 more days of this $1 billion summer camp is over. Isn't that what Vegas always been? Again, that's what Vegas always been. It's always been. It's always been, at least it was. It's not necessarily anymore. At least it was an adult playground. Anyway, Mike says that one of his valets saw something in the bushes as he was parking cars. And we go back to the pool again. We see the guy sleeping. And we get this shot of this girl under a waterfall, which is a gratuitous shot. A super gratuitous shot. But in this scene, what we hear is a song called, music cue, Luna Motive, written and performed by Rupert Pope. This comes up on all the versions that I could see. Again, DVD, Peacock, and Amazon. So that's the song that comes up, is Luna Motive, as we see the girl in the white bikini under the waterfall, just gratuitous. It's one of those Herbal Essence commercials. Remember Herbal Essence commercials? I don't even know if you could air those on YouTube. Anyway, the Stooges, the MIT Stooges are in the parking lot, not the parking lot, are in the bushes as they're trying to get things going on their scheme. And at this point, seemingly they're trying to take the casino. But even in 2003, they wouldn't necessarily have needed to, if they were going to do this, they wouldn't necessarily have needed to be on the grounds to hijack and hack into a casino. That you don't have to be there to do that now. People have done that. People have hacked into casinos and gotten. Matter of fact, there was something I saw recently, I think, on this one YouTube channel I watched, Jake's Life in Vegas, where he was talking about a settlement that had to come up after one of the casinos or one of the casino chains got hacked and people's information got out. So they wouldn't have necessarily had to have been on grounds to do that. But this is what we're led to believe as we're watching this. And Danny has them in interrogation, and we see the super geekiness of two of them. Kelvin Yu, the Asian one, he's more with it. He's more cool, actually. You can see from his demeanor, you can see from how he's dressed, you can see from his body type. He's more with it than the other ones. And Adam Consolo, he looking back at this is one of the worst, because not only do they have him looking like the geek with the glasses or whatever, but they put fake zits on him. And looking at this now on my 50-inch TV, 50-inch high-def TV, those look terrible. But it's like, that's like, sure, some, but like that's necessarily an indication of geekiness, because skin conditions happen. Anyway, Danny threatens them with the Patriot Act and legal action, etc., before they smell an attorney, and they then cough up to their scheme, where they're trying to get back at Caltech for beating MIT at the engineering convention last week. And they want to have MIT rules, Caltech sucks on all the signs all through Vegas as their get back prank. Which I guess feeds into them being super geeks, because that's a lame prank. That's a super lame prank. Like, it takes a lot to do it, but it's a lame prank. It's super, super duper lame. And as they go through this, it's always struck me when they go through this and they get hyped up about all the places where it'll run.
We pull this off, they're going to play it on MSNBC, CNBC,
NBC.
Why? Oh, you think you're owned by NBC? You have to call out NBC. You're on NBC. You're on NBC. You're on it. You're on it. I guess that means something now that this show is run on different channels, like through TNT and Cozy. I guess that's a shout out to them. That I guess does something if Cozy and TNT never edited it out. But yeah, it's a lame prank, but sure. And they've got this mock-up of what it would look like for them to do that, as if the casinos wouldn't see it and try to shut it down almost immediately. Well, they probably wouldn't, because most of the lights are always on in Vegas. So as they're in the interrogation room and Danny gets a call from Ed real quick about the Predator and the makeup, the geeks have hacked into his call. So they, just that quick, could hear and transcribe what he and Ed were talking about, and we see it there on the laptop. These are some super powerful laptops, even and especially for 2003. Like, laptops now, like those build a laptop. What did they put in those laptops? Plutonium? Like, that's fantastic. Anyway, they're talking about how they could go through the different makeup and identify people versus what they're using. And here, as the geeks are walking into the surveillance room, one of them says, "I told you they were still on analog." And we talked about analog briefly in one of the earlier episodes. I believe it was the first, maybe the second episode, where I mentioned that I worked in loss prevention before. And yes, analog was definitely still a thing in terms of security in the early 2000s. Yeah, everybody, yes. And this will come up again in another classic episode that we will be looking at in the near future. In the meantime, the in-between time, Ed sees that Danny has brought the geeks into the surveillance room. And Ed is a bit confused, because he thought that these guys are trying to knock over the casino, but they're not. And you could see the slight difference in generations and tech talk here, as Ed tells them that you can't get in because of the jamming system, and one of the geeks tells him this is where you can see those fake pimples really badly. And he says,
"This room is totally secured, and I have a jamming system."
Which keeps everyone outside from getting in. But once you're in, simple 802.11G card and a password generator is all you need. a sweet wireless network.
Thank you.
That's not a compliment. He's saying the geek is saying the geek has a sweet wireless network. He's not talking about the casino, because they probably don't. In 2003, they probably don't. Most places didn't, so they probably don't. Matter of fact, was there a lot of wireless? There really wasn't. They're still on analog security. They for sure don't have a sweet wireless network in the Montecito then. Ed is tipped in a little bit on Danny's plan that he had to cut them a bit of a deal in order for them to work with them. And he doesn't tell them exactly what it is. Good on Danny for keeping his promise and not telling us. It's better if it just happens, as opposed to telling you about it, because you're not going to say, okay, but we're going to do this to try to track our guy down. So we're also getting the convergence of stories in this aspect, which is another key aspect of Las Vegas. And here we see the guy. And Alien Commander from Troilus 6 is the mask that the Predator is wearing. Now, let me tell you something about stupid earworms. This is one of those stupid earworms where they tip off the kind of mask the guy is wearing. And wouldn't you know it, first off, the picture that they get is clearly a picture from wardrobe. But the earworm, when they're like, this is your guy right here, no doubt about it, and then the geeks do the Alien Commander salute.
Well, that's the guy right there. No doubt about it. Alien Commander!
That stupid half a second of audio has been playing in my head for the better part of 20 years. 20 years I've heard Alien Commander at random points in my life, and it just came for no reason. Nothing connected to Alien, nothing at all. Now, part of it, for me, is because it's also similar to another soundbite that came out around the same time from another one of my dear beloved TV shows, Scrubs, where the janitor, aka Yanni Tor, there's a scene where he mentions something about knife wrench, and the scene ends with him going, "Knife wrench for kids." And so those two sound bites have melded and mutated in my head. And for the last 20 years, they've set up shop, they've set up residence, they have their favorite couches and chairs. They live rent-free in my head. So thank you, Gary Scott Thompson and Bill Lawrence, for having insignificant sound bites that no one understands or gets that play repeatedly in my head. Anyway, we cut to Mystique. And there's a new party going on in Mystique. This is for the sci-fi convention. This is the last dance, I think, of the sci-fi convention. And we see a whole bunch of people in the Alien Commander masks. And it's only Ed and Danny now that are going in to find this guy. And they're going through and they see all the different masks and all the different guys partying in the same costume, the same outfit. And it all looks the same. And so Ed and Danny are taking off the masks of these guys, and our Predator sees them and he takes off. And Danny takes chase. Ed lays back as Danny is the one trying to take the mask off people, because he's going to try to cut this guy off, and he does. As the guy takes off, Ed throws a chair and cuts him off over by the elevator bay doors, and Danny keeps everyone back, and here we get full Ed. We get damn near Sonny Corleone as he holds the Predator back. He punches him, he shoves him in the elevator, and Danny says, "You can't do this." And Ed says, "You're either with me or not. I was kind of hoping you'd be with me." And we hear a voiceover going down Highway 160, and Danny calls Kitty from Traffic Control about shutting down the cameras on Highway 160 for a maintenance check. And she does it, and that's the last we see of Kitty ever on the show. I saw some stuff come up in research where some people on Twitter were like, I kind of wish we'd seen Kitty again. I do too. She wasn't a bad character. You could have used Kitty for other stuff. Kitty was fine. Could have brought Kitty back. Anyway, Danny's driving. Ed's in the back. It's pretty clear that Ed is holding this guy hostage in the back of his SUV. Through this scene, we got a music cue here. Baby Pain, performed by Fluke, is the song that we hear not on the DVD, Ironically enough, on the DVD, it's covered up fairly well, except there's some lyrics that you can still, like, you can hear that there's some singing over the production music that they laid on top of the DVD version. However, you do hear it on Peacock and the Amazon version. Now, this is interesting because this song was in the original airing. According to LasVegasTheSeries.com, LasVegas-theseries.com from the Wayback Machine, which is back up now, so you can check it out. Baby Pain, performed by Fluke, was the original song. And they edited it out of the DVD. I'd never heard it before until the Peacock and Amazon version. So look at Peacock. Actually this is another super random. Like, why would this song in particular be one that Peacock decides we're going to leave in and bring back? We're not going to edit it out. They edited out production music that didn't need to be edited out. But of all the songs, they left this one in. It's one of those weird anomalies of doing research for this show. But there it is. Baby Pain by Fluke. And it does set a tone if you're watching on Peacock or Amazon.
Why don't you take a little break? Yeah, that's a good idea. You're going to stretch the legs, wash the face, refocus. There you go.
If you're ready to find your fitness family focused on being knowledgeable, being open-hearted, getting results, and having an elevated experience, then you're ready for KORE. That's Core Nutrition Fitness. The NASM certified personal trainers at Core cater to all fitness levels, ages, and body types. Whether it's the Gluteus Maximus and Queen Camp classes for the ladies, or the Minute Monday weight training for everyone. If you're in the Los Angeles area and ready to build better health and great friendships, the Core Fitness family is the place for you. Go to CoreNutritionFitness.com now for details. That's KORE NutritionFitness.com. As we whoosh through the desert down Highway 160, and we see Ed's SUV, his Hummer, going through the sweltering heat, and he pulls the Predator out of the SUV, the Hummer, and he kicks him. And here we go. Now we're getting Ed. Ed is he's just kicked right to the ribs. He's gonna leave this guy groveling. And now we're gonna see a lot of mob Ed. Old school mob Ed. And we see Ed with a gun in his waist. He's got it right there. And he pulls it out. Danny, get the shovels. And he tells the Predator to strip. And he starts to get rid of some of his clothes. His shirt's off. His pants stay on for most of the shots. Here's a bit of a goof. In one of the shots near the end, the Predator's pants are off. I suppose there was an alternate take where Ed makes him strip all the way down to his boxers. They used most of the footage through most of the shots where he just strips down to his pants. But there's one quick shot where he's in his boxers, so there must have been something in editing that they decided that they used that shot and didn't think too hard about it or whatever, but through the rest of the shots, he has his pants on, but he stripped down basically through his shirt and his couple of shirts. And then Ed tells the Predator to dig. He should dig his own grave. Start digging. And he says, I can't, the ground's too hard. He says, dig. And I don't know how he's going to have him dig. He's going to have him use his, dig through his skin or whatever to dig his own, how would that even work? And then the Predator says, please don't. And Ed gives another great line.
Please don't work when my daughter said it, or any of the others. Did it work? I didn't think so. Just say goodbye, dirtbag. Ed, no!
Josh gives Josh is better he's a lot better this episode. He's super a lot better this episode. But he's very earnest in his cries for Ed to not kill this guy in the desert. Every time I've seen this, I've been like, okay, not a tear would be shed for me. But Danny doesn't want him to go through with it because of the repercussions that it would have on him. And after he pulls the trigger, that's the shot that we see the Predator in his underwear, but after that, his pants are still back on. And he is fairly humiliated. Ed pulled the trigger, and he looks back at Danny and says, "You didn't think I was actually going to shoot him, did you?" And we hear sirens approaching in the background. He does leave the Predator in the desert, or at least he goes back to his car as the cops arrive. So Ed had something planned. We whoosh back up Highway 160, and it's a long whoosh. But as we whoosh back up, you know what we start to see? We start to see signs. Caltech sucks. MIT rules. We see a few of them as we whoosh down the strip. They don't even stop on them too long. Like, there's one that they stop in the desert, but the rest of them really do whoosh by. Like, you would have to stop to whoosh through all of them. And then they stop on the one for the Montecito. And then that's it. And we go back to the pool. One last time. And Danny gives the narration about Groundhog Summer and how something else is going to come through. 300,000 other people are going to come through, and Las Vegas natives take care of their own. And no matter how crazy it gets, the party never stops. And finally, the suntanning guy wakes up. Now, the guy suntanning, I believe, is credited in this episode as Lone Guy. Lone Guy. Lone Guy, because he's by himself through the whole episode. He is another one that only has a few credits. And I almost wanted to make him VIP guest star, but he's not. And I kind of almost want to nominate him for Montecito Magic because he has the best time ever not doing anything. He gets to just sleep through days and days. You know how refreshed he's got to feel after sleeping for days and days? You know how refreshed he's got to feel? Oh my goodness. I can't even imagine. That's some magic right there. But I think the real Montecito Magic might go to the MIT Stooges because they actually got what they wanted. They got the MIT rules, Caltech suck signs. They were down on their luck because Caltech beat them in the engineering convention, but they got some help from a staff member, Danny, who sprinkled some of the Montecito Magic on them in exchange for some help, but it still counts. So you tell me on the social medias, Twitter, usually specifically, but you could also do it on Instagram or on Facebook, who gets the Montecito Magic. To me, I think it's the MIT guys, but there is an argument for our lone guy here. Our lone guy is played by John Lombardo. He's one of 3 John Lombardos that are in IMDb. He has very few credits. He has one for The Center of the World in 2001. He has one for High Roller, the Stu Unger story, as Mario. In 2003, he has Las Vegas as lone guy. He then has The Bet in 2013, so 10 years difference, where he plays Phil. And his last credit was in Outlaws and Angels as Enoch in 2016. That's it, and there's no other information I have on John Lombardo. There are a few different John Lombardo. I couldn't find any other information on him, but this is our lone guy, and I believe this is him because he's not credited as Suntanny Guy. He's credited as Lone Guy. This is weird, but sure, he's credited as Lone Guy here. We're going to call this John Lombardo, and he gets his one line of the whole episode, even though he's been here the whole time.
This is the greatest Groundhog Summer ever! Viva Las Vegas, baby!
And you get the credit, and he imaginary lat syndrome has killed so many people, but he gets the imaginary lats going as he goes into the pool and is laughed at by a couple of the ladies so much that one of them falls off her inflatable chair in the water, and that is the episode Groundhog Summer. By the way, in that scene there was another musical cue, that last pool scene. The song is called Super Bad by Top Dogs, D-O-G-Z. Super Bad by Top, and you've heard that in a bunch of places. You've heard that song a bunch. So there you go. Now you can look it up and you can find it and you can listen to it on your own. It's called Super Bad by Top Dogs, D-O-G-Z, and it's been used in a whole bunch of stuff. Now there are a couple of other songs from Las Vegas, the series website, that I couldn't find on any incarnation that I had, because again, I don't have the original airing. I couldn't locate that. I couldn't locate a couple of songs from what's credited as Ben Fabric on the website, but could also be Bent Fabric. who was a European artist who did a lot of stuff that would come up in production work, but the songs are pretty good. One of the songs could be Jukebox, but I can't tell. That possibly Sam at the Pool. I couldn't tell on the I couldn't tell. I couldn't get, like, it didn't sound like it. When I actually was able to find that song by Bent Fabric, it wasn't the song. I don't know if there's a different version by Ben Fabric. There's also Yada Yada Yada, also by Ben Fabric, and there's also 3 M's in both and again by Ben Fabric. I couldn't find any of the Ben Fabric songs, so if you know anything about Ben Fabric or the music that was allegedly used on this episode, let me know. This is everything I said it would be. It is a great James Caan episode. It's fewer Delinda scenes than originally thought before watching this, but the few scenes that Molly Sims has, she delivers. She delivers a nice, healthy range of emotions, of expressions, of line readings, you feel for Delinda in this episode. Delinda becomes a fully fleshed out 3-dimensional character in this episode. It's a shame that this is the incident that has to do that, but it works. But she is that 3-dimensional character watching this. We've seen the flighty 20-something Delinda. Now we see a more vulnerable Delinda. Now we see the scared little girl. Now we see the resilient young lady. Now we see the fighter. We see the toughness. And again, it's weird that we don't see more Nessa in this episode, considering it's so grounded and surrounding her United States family, her adopted family, that she's not involved in more of this, that she's not at the hospital bedside with Delinda, that Jillian's not there, at least not at that moment. Maybe they come later. It's never talked about. It's just slightly weird, just slightly different. Like, I know we do get that touching moment with Ed and Delinda, but I would think, especially since Ed seemingly probably wasn't on Montecito ground at the time, he wasn't wearing a suit, probably at home somewhere. Where was Delinda or Jillian? Where was Nessa? Nessa would have been there. Nessa for sure would have been there, and especially with the way Delinda is there for Nessa later on in the series, it's odd. That's odd to me. Like, and they knew. Maybe there was a difference in production schedule versus episode air schedule. Maybe they produced this one before we got some more of the backstory with Nessa, and we didn't know what the connection was yet. Maybe this was before the Jokers and Fools episode. Yeah, that's just a little bit odd. But overall, this episode is one of the stronger early episodes, one of the more emotionally packed early episodes. We had a more fun one last week. We have a more super emotionally packed one this week. And it is again one of those episodes that every Las Vegas fan remembers. And they remember so much. There's so many key elements here that work. The show is definitely now in its stride. And again, the acting. And my hat's off again, as far as VIPs of the whole episode. Forget guest stars, whatever. Molly Sims just takes the cake this week. She takes it all. Slightly fewer scenes, but she takes the cake. Over James Caan. Yes, I'll go out on, I'm not even out on a limb. I will go out and say it was Molly Sims in one of her early, if she had any other acting roles before this show, other than being a model on like Just Shoot Me or something like that. Hats off to Michael Watkins and his direction, specifically of the actors in this episode, and very specifically again for Molly Sims. This is just an amazing episode of hers. This is really kind of her coming out party, and it's a job well done on everybody's part, specifically Michael Watkins' direction, Molly Sims' acting. They do tremendous work here. Next week, we have another fun one. We have another really fun one. This is Semper Spy. This is one of my favorites too. I like Semper Spy. Listen, there's going to be one guest star who, I don't care who you vote for. I mean, I do care who you vote for. Please vote for the VIP guest stars on Twitter and on Reddit and on Facebook. However, I have my favorite. I know who my favorite guest star is next week. And I've liked this actor forever. He's another one like James LeJour, who when I spot him in something, I'm like, oh, I'm going to watch this. I'm going to at least give it a chance because he's great. Even if what's around him isn't great, he is great. And if I catch him in something, I'm going to watch it because he's fantastic. That's a clue right there. So you can go and you can see who the guest stars are next week and you can see who we're going to talk about. However, we are going to see a return of Jillian. Ooh, that's fantastic. We're going to see a return of Jillian. We're going to see a couple of guest stars that are going to work out tremendously. This is Semper Spy. Remember Semper Spy? This is the one where the prank wars go on between Ed and Danny. That's just a great premise. This is a great premise. And so my cheeks are hurting right now from smiling so hard about talking about Semper Spy. So I'm going to leave now before they fall off my face. But before I do, I appreciate your support. I appreciate you following the show on all avenues. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you can find us. If you want the video version of the podcast, the best place to find that is going to be on rumble.com. And there's a link on the link tree where you can find that. Just look up the Podecito, too. Just look up the Podecito on everything. You can support the show in any number of ways, support our sponsors, all that stuff. And in the meantime, the in-between time, I appreciate you coming along on this journey with me. I appreciate the conversations we've had. I appreciate the building of the Podecito fan base. I think I can call it the Podecito fan base. Yeah, you guys are VIPs to me. I appreciate the building of that and the conversation we've already had so far and all these different avenues and the seeming almost kind of resurgence of a bright spot of the fandom here of Las Vegas. And until next time, when we go over one of my absolute favorite episodes, Semper Spy. Baby, until next time, until next week, I appreciate you coming along this journey with me. Thank you so much, and take care.